Wellspring by Teresa Hampton. God rules. Have you sniffed lately? There's a lot of uncertainty in the air. I'm reminded of an experience related by my father-in-law. He met a Chinese man named George Tien who preached on the radio. Tien told him that God had used Mao Zedong, the unbelieving communist leader of China, to give him the privilege of preaching the gospel in China. Say what? Tien began to explain. When Mao Zedong became the supreme ruler of communist China in 1949, he began a series of changes. For centuries, the Chinese had worshipped their ancestors. In an effort to impose communism, he outlawed ancestor worship. He did not want the ancestors competing with ideals of communism. Next, he established a universal language. For centuries, the people had an untold number of dialects. In order to speak to the people, he required every citizen to know Mandarin Chinese. When the universal language was well rooted, he then required every Chinese person to have a radio so he could speak directly to the people, conveying communist thought and leadership. The foundation laid by Mao Zedong allowed George Tien to begin preaching over radio waves into China about God and His Son. Having no competition with ancestor worship and using the universal language of Mandarin Chinese, his voice of truth came to the Chinese people over the radios provided to each person by Mao Zedong. In other words, God used an unbelieving ruler to accomplish His good will. The same thing happened with King Nebuchadnezzar. In the 4th chapter of the book of Daniel, the once arrogant, unbelieving king finally acknowledged this great truth. The Most High rules in the kingdom of men and gives it to whomever He chooses. Daniel chapter 4, verse 26. When we sniff the air of uncertainty before, during, and after an election process, perhaps we should read and reread the short book of Daniel and cling to the great truth therein. The God Most High can and does accomplish marvelous things through good and bad leaders. Men do not rule. God rules. Today's verse. Let every soul be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are appointed by God. Romans 13, verse 1.